Today on BRStv Investigates, do you want to save upwards of $1,800 on your tank lights? How about only needing one fixture to cover your entire tank? What about the almost guaranteed success in your reef tank by just plugging it in and watching your tank thrive? If this sounds right up your alley, then this video is for you. Coming up, we show you a foolproof approach to reef tank lighting that's been proven to work for over tens of thousands of tanks spanning multiple decades. Hi, I'm Randy with this Friday's BRStv Investigates, where we experiment on our own tanks so you don't have to experiment on yours. And today, the conversation is really about the ATI Sunpower T5 fixtures, but within that, Ryan and I tested the configuration of 16 different bulb types, tested them both visually and with our spectrometer, and give you our BRS recommended bulb mix for 4, 6, and 8 bulb T5 fixtures. If you haven't considered a T5 lighting fixture as an option on your tank before, the data I'm about to share with you just might turn you into a T5 user after all, or at least the thought of saving you almost $2,000 over other lighting options might. By the end of today's video, you'll know if an ATI Sunpower T5 fixture is the right choice for you, complete with data and information on how many bulbs you'll need, how high to mount them, and the BRS recommended bulb combination to help you attain the LPS, Softy, or SPS tank of your dreams. Right up front, there's absolutely no denying that T5s work and have helped thousands of reefers achieve jaw-dropping reef tanks for decades, whether it's a tank filled with LPS and softies or more advanced tanks chock full of those sometimes finicky SPS. It literally doesn't get any more plug and play than installing a handful of bulbs, plugging it in, and sitting back to enjoy the ride, but the benefits don't just end there. Beyond being one of the least complicated ways to light a reef tank, the simplicity behind using a large panel of diffused soft light, where the source of light is as large as the tank you're trying to illuminate, winds up creating little to no intensely concentrated hotspots, nearly eliminates shadowing effects, and most closely replicates the natural sun in terms of an even blanket of light coming from all angles, all of which are directly related to how successful T5 lighting technology is, and almost certainly why newer LED technology has been trying to emulate those features since their introduction to the hobby. But better yet, as we're about to show you using these 4, 6, and 8 bulb ATI Sunpower fixtures, you're going to see firsthand why T5s have been dubbed the gold standard in reef tank lighting, and how a blast from the hobby's past can help you achieve your dream tank while also saving you anywhere from $200 to almost $2,000 over other LED light modules we've previously tested. To start down that path today, let's talk about how many ATI Sunpower T5 fixtures we recommend to light our 60 and 120 gallon test tanks, and the answer is simple: you only need one. Okay, so the real question here, since the Sunpowers come in 24, 36, 48, and 60-inch fixtures, which cover many common tank sizes out there, is how many bulbs do you need for the lower par demand tank full of wavy LPS and softies, or how many bulbs will get you to a dream tank of the most epic SPS jam-packed full of acros and sticks? This recommendation is pretty darn simple and based on the par numbers we're going to show you in just a minute, but for those LPS tanks similar in dimensions to our 60 and 120 gallon test tanks, a properly sized 4 bulb fixture will get the job done, while a full 8 bulb Sunpower will supply those higher par numbers throughout the entire tank for SPS dominated systems. However, ATI also has 6 bulb fixtures available, so where does that leave them? Again, this one is pretty simple. If your dream is to fill your tank with nearly every variety and type of coral you can get your hands on, or basically a mixed tank with SPS and sticks at the top, then 6 bulbs will be the way to go. We're about to share the supporting data on how we decided on those bulb recommendations in just a moment, but before we do, the next obvious question is how high you should mount each one of these 4, 6, and 8 bulb options for optimal spread and light distribution. Let's find out in our next test. In order to get mounting height right, we follow a simple testing procedure where we start with the light fixture over our 24 square inch 60 gallon tank at 6 inches above the waterline, take a grid of 36 par measurements 6 inches deep in the tank, then we raise the light up inch by inch, testing along the way until we find that balance between optimal spread and minimal light spill out of the tank, which for us is no more than 15%. Typically when we conduct this test using smaller form factor LED modules, As we raise the light higher, we can clearly see distinct benefits in reducing any center hotspot while also increasing the spread and distribution into the outer edges of the tank. However, unlike most LEDs, which usually spread the light into the tank in the form of a spotlight, beam, or soft wide-angle floodlight, T5 fixtures are unique in that because they are a larger soft diffuse light source, typically sized to similar dimensions as the tank they're trying to illuminate, they are already optimized for light spread and distribution, and although raising them higher will distribute the light slightly better, the primary purpose of raising them is for PAR adjustments to meet your tank goals. I think Ryan really nails this concept between the 3 different light types in his video about mastering light spread, which I'll leave for you down in the description below. With that in mind, for testing the mounting height of the ATI Sunpower 4, 6, and 8 bulb fixtures, we start with the 4 bulb Sunpower, which we've already identified as being our recommended BRS and softy light. So because of that, we'll keep in mind our PAR goal of 75 to 150 while trying to identify the optimal mounting height. First, at 6 inches above the water, we saw an overall average PAR of 145 and a warm spot in the center of 278 PAR. In order to reduce that hotspot center into that 75 and 150 target range, we continue to raise the light until we find a sweet spot. At 7 inches, that hotspot drops down to 230, which is still a bit high for our goal, but at only a 9% overall PAR average reduction to 132, so we raise the 4 bulb fixture up to 8 inches. Here at 8 inches, we've reached a center hotspot of 205 with just 12% of the light spilling out of the tank, and when we raise the light 1 more inch to 9 inches, we find a smoother center much closer to our PAR goals and within our 15% threshold for light spill. Due to the shape of this ATI 4 bulb fixture, really no matter how high we mount it, we still see a very defined warm strip across the center where the back and the front of the tank is going to be much dimmer. But in reality, this goes to show how hard mounting height is to mess up using large soft diffuse light sources like T5s. It may be hard to see in the numbers, but getting this perfect isn't as critical as it is using spot or floodlights, and following the heat map from 6 up to 9 inches shows firsthand how we use mounting height primarily for dialing in optimal PAR. The ATI 6 bulb Sunpower is next, which is our BRS recommended light for a mixed reef tank, meaning we try to fill as much as the upper third of the tank as possible in that 200 to 350 PAR range for SPS, with pockets of PAR much closer to our LPS goal of 150, certainly after you factor in shaded areas in the aquascape. At 6 inches, there is a distinct rectangular shape. However, with the addition of 2 more bulbs, we now show a much higher center PAR of 482 with an overall PAR average of 285. I'd also point out that because the bulbs are closer to the front and back of the tank, we start to see the benefits of a light source that's closer to the size of the tank that we're illuminating. Right away I can tell that because the light is closer to the edges from front to back, we won't be able to raise it too high without rapidly losing light spill out of the tank and into the surrounding room, which turns out to be true when we move the light up to 7 inches off the water. Here we've reduced that center down by 100 PAR to 380, yet already we're at our threshold for light spillage with a total average PAR of 241, which works out to be exactly 15%. Next up, we test the 8 bulb ATI Sunpower, which we already stated was our BRS recommended amount of bulbs for SPS dominated system, with PAR goals of 200 to 350 in most of the tank. Starting at 6 inches, there's a whopping 616 PAR average in the center and a 404 overall average PAR. However, now we're seeing a real benefit to matching the light size to the lighting area, where on the front and back edges of the tank, instead of PAR being in the mid-hundreds like we saw with the 6 bulb, we're now seeing PAR upward of 350. Although we have the spread and distribution we're looking for using this 8 bulb Sunpower, this model's non-dimmable, and so there's only one way to manually dim this much PAR output, and that is to raise it higher. So we move the light up to 7 inches and find a reduced center down to 523 and an overall average PAR of 365. Obviously, this is still too hot for our SPS goals, so we raise the light again to 8 inches off the water and find a reduced center down to 479 and a total average PAR at 343. Although an 8-inch mounting height for the 8 bulb ATI Sunpower, by the numbers, looks optimal because we've hit our 15% threshold for light spilling into the room, The real goal here using T5 technology that can't be dimmed is to strike a balance between that optimal mounting light spread that surrounds the SPS corals in an even blanket of light from all sides, while at the same time providing that optimal par pocket of 200 to 350. Because of this, in order to meet that second goal of optimal par, we need to push the light up to 9 inches to achieve those par numbers throughout the tank, meaning we're going to have to sacrifice a bit of efficiency with a little more light spill. But as you'll see in the par numbers and the top, middle, and bottom of the tank in just a moment, raising the light a little higher is the proper way to get this done. The next part of today's test revolves around our BRS recommended spectrum mix and bulb combinations that we came up with to achieve a tank that not only looks good to the eye, but primarily targets a broad spectrum approach with a wide blue offering for coral energy and metabolic function. Many reefers get hung up on choosing the right bulb combinations, but in reality, getting this right is pretty simple. In previous BRStv Investigates tests, Ryan and I tested the spectrum output of 16 different T5 bulb types, categorized them into 6 different groups, and shared what each one looked like when we compared them over the same mixed reef tank. You want to check out that data for yourself, I'll put a link in the description below, but based on those tests, we came up with our BRS recommended bulb combinations for each of the 4, 6, and 8 bulb ATI Sunpowers by starting with a base of blue spectrum bulbs using the ATI Blue Pluses with their wide spectrum band between 400 and 500 nanometers, adding in some ATI Coral Plus hybrid bulbs to make the tank look good and balance out the blue, then filling in that 420 actinic spectrum range using ATI True Actinic bulbs. What that looks like for the 4 bulb fixture is 2 blue pluses in the outer edges with a Coral Plus and True Actinic in the middle for a nice balanced look to the tank. The 6 bulb fixture is very similar, except now we have 4 blue pluses in the edges and a Coral Plus and True Actinic in the center. Not much has changed here, and the color is visually the same, but the tank is now brighter. The 8 bulb Sunpower follows a similar ratio of blue to hybrid to actinic bulbs, using 4 blue pluses, 2 Coral Pluses, and 2 True Actinics shown in this configuration. Again, the bulb ratio and the color of the tanks are similar, and the only thing that we changed here was to increase the intensity. What we're left with using these bulb combos is a nearly identical spectrum output across each of the 4, 6, and 8 bulb fixtures, which we believe to be our best attempt at creating that wide, broad spectrum approach targeted at serving the needs of the corals first, while also making an eye-pleasing tank and accents our corals' fluorescence. In the dynamic spectrum test you're about to see next, we learn exactly why T5s reign supreme in blending the spectrum from 3 different bulb types into one cohesive spectrum inside our tanks. To test spectrum blending, we take 10 different spectrum measurements underneath our 60-gallon test tank full of moving water, where we watch for shifts or changes to the overall spectrum graph. In previous tests using LEDs, blending spectrum flawlessly has been somewhat of a challenge, which is due to the way LED technology uses nearly a dozen individual spectrum colored diodes to create one blend, rather than T5 bulbs which emit a diffuse blended spectrum from the bulb itself. In this case, spectrum blending is really now about how the different bulb choices blend together. Across the 10 testing points, we see an impressive, nearly perfect spectrum blending performance where there is an ultra flat and nearly undetectable shift in the overall spectrum chart. This is the gold standard, or what good looks like when we test for spectrum blending. We may find an LED that's as good in this aspect, but obviously nothing beats this. Next, we combine all that data for our BRS recommended mounting height, amount of bulbs, and recommended bulb combo that we just covered for each of these 3 ATI Sunpower fixtures to give you a simple plug-and-play answer to lighting your tank, whether your goal is to fill the tank with LPS softies and polyps, a mixed tank with a little bit of every coral type, including some SPS, or a full-blown SPS-dominated system packed to the gills with acros and sticks. We're only sharing the par data we tested for the 4, 6, and 8 bulb Sunpower fixtures over our 60-gallon 24-inch cube, but should translate pretty darn close to the 120-gallon, because 120 is basically 2 60 cubes put together, and we would expect similar 4, 6, and 8 bulb 48-inch fixtures to perform nearly identically using the same recommended mounting heights and bulb combinations. With that, we're first going to target a predominantly LPS and softy tank using our 4 bulb fixture over the 60-gallon test tank, where our goal is to fill the entire tank from top to bottom in par between 75 and 150. With the 4 bulb mounted at our BRS recommended 9 inches off the water and using this bulb combo you see here, we tested 78 out of 108 data points within that 75 to 150 range, or 72% of the entire 60-gallon cube from top to bottom. So if we were looking at the 6 bulb fixture mounted at the recommended 7 inches off the water, initially when we see the PAR numbers at the top of the tank, it may seem like 6 bulbs might actually put us in that target PAR range of 200 to 350 for SPS dominated systems. But looking at the rest of the tank in the middle and bottom, we see how quickly those higher PAR numbers fall off, where we start with 20 out of 36 points hitting that PAR goal in the top, followed by only 13 out of 36 in the middle and 0 out of 36 near the bottom of the tank. Although these aren't the numbers that we'd expect to see for creating an SPS wall-to-wall dominated tank, it's easy to see how 6 bulbs can be the ideal option for mixed tanks, where we strategically place higher PAR demand corals like SPS near those upper third of the tank, followed by some LPS and softies and polyps near the middle and bottom where the PAR is less intense. As for the PAR output for our 8 bulb Sunpower fixture using our BRS recommended bulb choices, looking at the data for 108 testing points from the top, middle, and bottom, it's clear to see why we had to choose a 9-inch mounting height to reduce that PAR into our target range of 200 to 350 in order to hit 74% or 80 out of 108 points in that sweet spot pocket that SPS seemed to thrive in. Because this is the non-dimmable ATI Sunpower model, and because the differences in PAR between different bulb types are so close together, moving the light source higher off the water is the only way to control PAR, while at the same time achieving a blanket of light with little to no shadowing around the corals. This type of T5 performance throughout all of today's tests is absolutely the definition of wide, soft diffuse light that really gets to the heart of how this type of lighting technology is a completely different approach to lighting your tank with very distinct benefits over other types of spotlights and soft floodlights that make up our hobby's lighting choices. If you want to know what those benefits are, and better yet, how to achieve similar benefits using LEDs, then check out Ryan's video on mastering your tank lighting and lighting spread over here.